Meanwhile, the New York Times reports that because General Flynn didn't tell administration officials the whole story about his conversations with the Russian ambassador, the Justice Department feared that Mr. Flynn could be vulnerable to blackmail by Moscow. That warning was reportedly communicated to the White House last month. David Sanger is a national security correspondent for the New York Times, and he joins us now from Stanford, California. David, your paper is among the outlets reporting that the Justice Department warned the White House that General Flynn could be vulnerable to blackmail by Moscow. What would have been the proper protocol for the administration at that point?
Well, at that moment, you react to the Justice Department warning, and you begin your inquiry in a fairly serious way. I mean, the issue is now, had this not become public, what was the White House planning to do with this information? Ignore it? Hope it didn't leak out? Conduct a quiet investigation? Come up with some other reason to deal with General Flynn? It's not clear to us what their game plan here was.
And you actually wrote about the turmoil in the National Security Council. You wrote about that before General Flynn's resignation, and you said it was a problem from the top down. Now that General Flynn is no longer there, do you think that will be enough to stabilize the NCS or NSC rather, or are there more problems than just General Flynn?
Well, I think the problems are greater than General Flynn. It will probably be a period of continued turmoil because the few people who've been put in sort of senior directorship level at the NSC, which is the main coordinating council for national security and foreign policy decisions, are many of them people who General Flynn handpicked either from his past life at the Defense Intelligence Agency or in the military. It's not clear whether or not those are the same people that General Flynn's successor will want. So you could have a situation in which you're sort of going back to sort of the beginning point here and recreating an NSC 25 days into an administration, just at the minute when you're supposed to be already settling into the chair, beginning to receive the intelligence, getting clear lines of authority, and making decisions.
David, in your most recent article, you have a lot of sources that are talking to you about the inner workings of what's actually happening at the White House. Is this, I think a lot of people, a lot of Americans are wondering about the numerous leaks and the number of people that are willing to talk to reporters about what is happening at the White House. Is this the leakiest White House you've ever encountered this early in an administration? I know there are leaky White Houses, you know, going back to
Sure.
Thomas Jefferson, but I'm just curious about compared to where we are today, right now, 3 weeks in.
It is unusual, and I think it's unusual in part because there were people who were alarmed that executive orders were being written, that decisions were being made without being fully vetted. And we've had some cases in which we've heard of senior members of the government who are only reading about provisions in some of these draft executive orders when they read them in the Times or other media reports because they weren't being widely circulated. So there was a breakdown of the process, and the process is meant to vet the information and vet the decisions and get everything aired out. When that doesn't happen internally, it begins to happen externally.
Well, speaking to that, on Friday, the president was asked about these reports circulating in the media about General Flynn having an inappropriate conversation with Russian officials, and he said that he didn't know anything about it. What do we know about that? I mean, he should have known at that point, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure which of those would be worse. I mean, if in fact the transcripts were being shown to senior officials at the White House, the warnings were being issued, and that didn't flow to the president, that strikes me as particularly worrisome since it involves an official who's a direct report to him.
All right, we're also now, David, seeing multiple names being floated as possible replacements for General Flynn. Based on your reporting, where does the search for a new national security advisor stand?
Well, we hear that there may be some potential candidates coming in to the White House even as soon as today. There's a deputy to General Mattis, General Hayward, who some people think could be in a leading position. You've heard the name of David Petraeus, the former CIA director, and of course former general who did the Iraqi surge. Very experienced as well. I'm sure you'll see a number of other names. You could bring in somebody who has had long experience in running a National Security Council smoothly, if you could convince them to come back. Steve Hadley, who was the second National Security Advisor under President Bush, comes to mind. But the question is, who's willing to do it? And what kind of NSC does the president want? What kind of decision making does he want? Because this choice will probably determine what the tone and decision making processes of the council will be for the rest of his term.
All right, David Sanger from the New York Times, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.